We'll continue now with the process here in Substance Painter, and we have at this moment a character that or an object that is ready to be painted that has a group of texture lists that are going to be created. So we have one per each object that's going to be painted, and each one of those will contain layers as we said before. Um, But before we get started with the painting component of it, or with the creation of textures, we need to take care of an additional set of business. That is that Substance requires or needs so for you to paint to set up the maps, like the UV maps, for it to know where they are assigned to. So in this case, we're gonna have to bake those maps, and that would help us organizing on letting know Substance what is it that it needs to be painted. So when we click on the bake mesh maps under the texture setting set settings, we are shown with a bunch of options here that allow us to create those maps. In this case, we are not going to do normal maps, and we are not going to do thickness. We're going to stay within world space normal. We're going to stay with the ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, and position. So, um, and if you pay attention to this, we're going to start by just simply under the common attribute, we're going to change our size from 1024 to 2048. That way we have a larger size image. We now need to go and create some parameters for some of these other ones, individuals, and one of them is the ID. And the ID is going to help us use those different segments or shaders that we created and part that we created to separate them, if you remember. And right now, when I have this section selected, you see on the texture set, I get to see the different objects that came under my different assets within my program. So I can click on any of them, and they will be assigned on a specific map. But I don't need to do just to single one. I need to do them all. So I'm going to change some vertex color to material color. That way it gives me the option to change it. Then you see now that this apply to all gets turned on. I'm going to just apply to all. So all objects got selected now to create an ID for all of them within the program. So now we're gonna go back up to the common settings for baking, and we are going to now connect or help with the ID by bringing additional information so that it knows how to assign those sets a bit more properly. In order to do that, we will use that file that we created in Maya in the previous video that had some IDs connected to it. So I'm going to go and look for high definition meshes, although we are not using high and low resolutions, at least not in this process, but we're going to still use a model that has those IDs. So I'm going to go for the RoboHead ID FBX that I had created. I'm going to open that one. So that one is going to be used as an additional material, additional information to separate my things. Then, if you remember when we saved in Maya, the original file, we had ID, and the other file we had, and the name is main. So we're gonna put under the low poly mesh the word main, which is my main file, is the main file that came in first when I opened up Substance, or when I created my file in Substance. So I'm gonna change the suffix there from low to main, so that way any object that it finds with the word main is going to be assigned a specific map or set to that set. And in this one, I'm going to use the suffix ID that was on the other file that was in this file. So that means that wherever it finds the word ID is going to be assigning that specific mapping to it. Again, it feels a little bit cumbersome, but as long as you create the two files, with one with the name ID and the one with the name main, And of course, the one that has ID has colors in this in the shaders. Then you can bake all the texture sets. So you're gonna let it go, and it's gonna go through your different settings, and it's going to create for now those different options of different channels that will allow you to paint on each different layer. See there, it's creating multiple ones. It takes us a few seconds and minutes for it to go through the different parts. Of course, the more objects you have, the longer it takes. It's almost done, and then you see that it just finished successfully 100%. So I'm gonna say OK, and then you see here now that there is under the select normal map, there are a bunch of different things that got added to it, which include this world space normal, ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, and position. So if I go and look under the different texture set list, you'll see that each one of these is going to have their own individual set of normal maps, or maps better. So you see that I can go to the left ear. The left ear has its own, and you see that the color ID is starting to show there. Now I can go and look at those to see how they are showing, or how the different maps have been baked by going and changing here and looking under the different ways to find those things. For example, I can go under normal, and it'll show me what information from the world space normal, which is the one that we had selected. We don't have a normal per se brought in here. We have a space normal, we have the ID, and you can see here the colors that we created in Maya to separate the different objects, and we're going to be using these ones later. We have the ambient occlusion that gives me the occlusion information for my different channels. Curvature that gives me some information for it to have understanding of how the shape goes, and position, which is more like information for the program within itself. And I can go back up to my material to look at my object as it is going to be looking when all of those channels are combined. Again, those channels are the ways for Substance to know how to apply different attributes to each layer. You see, for example, right now you see the base color, the height, the roughness, the metallic, and the normal, and they will work based on these maps. So we are almost ready to start working with some coloring and painting. The only thing is that I'm not going to be painting on all of it at once. I'm going to start painting for individual segments. So I want to call my texture set list, and I'm going to separate or isolate just my antenna, which is using the main shader for now, and is going to be my main object to paint, so that I have a little bit easier start with it. And I'm going to for that antenna, I need to work on its own layers. As I said before, each one of these sets have their own layers. So right now I have a basic layer. I'm going to click on this button to pull that menu out so that I have it here, and I'm going to also work with the settings or the properties for that it's going to work on the specific layers. I'm not going to follow the advice they give you when you're working on this, so that you can have the two here. Again, is the layers and the properties, which initially was showing as a, if you close it again, as this little kind of pencil brush tool that you can just go and grab it and just place it right there. I'm sorry, not there, right at the bottom. And I have those two active there. Right now I'm working on the antenna set, and I have one single layer for it, and I have my properties to work on it. But in order to work on it, it's not just simply go and painting on it. I need to create a layer that is going to be a fill layer to do a base for it. So I'm going to create a new layer here. I just add a fill layer to the thing, and that one is filled. I'm going to turn this one off, which is an empty one. And this fill layer, when you click on the layer, you see all your properties for the layer show up, specifics about it. And the first thing that we discover is that we see the material with the different attributes that that layer is going to have, or that fill layer is going to have. In this case, I'm not going to work with the bump, neither of them to work with the normals. It's going to be more in the color, maybe some of the roughness and the metal. And by unchecking those, you see that certain things get unselected down here. So the very first thing I can do is that for the color, I can go and pick a specific color. Of course, this is based on your design. So you can say, for example, okay, if this is my initial color, that's what it's going to be. And you see that also I can go here and change the roughness of my object, so it's duller or even a lot more contrasted, or with a higher specularity. I'm going to keep it set with some specularity on it. Remember, it's reflecting right now that sky dome or that dome that is around it, so that gives me a good reference for it. I'm going to keep some of the roughness, a little bit less of the specularity just there, just to show some of the paint still on it. I can also crank up the metallic aspect of it so that it becomes more chrome-like or less chrome-like. So I'm going to just keep it somewhere here, maybe bring this one up a little bit more so that I have a little bit of both present on my layer. That is my initial fill layer. I probably should save my file so that I can start working on my first version of it. I'm going to say robot head 001, and there's a surface painter. Okay, so this allows me to look at the color information on it. Now, also, of course, I need to add a little bit of extra information to make this a little attractive. And of course, you know, I have a plan, and my plan, of course, goes based on what my design is going to be. Right now, I haven't talked about that, but you want to see that, of course, you want to go back to your plan. I have some reference images going with my original idea, trying to think of what kind of the texture is it I'm trying to paint. I'm just, my idea, of course, I can make a perfect blue texture, but I want to create something that's a little bit richer, something that shows some, you know, like this guy has been through battles and some hardship and difficulties, or just, you know, creating some scratches and information. I want to maintain some of that specularity in it, maybe not gone too rusty on it, but having a little bit of a shine and specularity and some scratches and maybe a little bit of rust here and there, just to make him a bit older looking. So in order to do that, you can, right now we're looking at the material component. I can go to roughness, and roughness, you see that right now there is not a lot of information on that material. You see that the roughness, you still have it turned on here, which is this one, and if you modify the information there, you'll make it less or more rough. So what we can do is that we can create a new layer to work on the roughness. So just to do that, I'm just simply going to create a new channel here. Actually, you should rename those layers. So this one's going to be base paint or base color. And this one I'm going to go roughness. That way I know what it is. Let me just call it slightly differently. So it's rough. And this one I am going to work on, but in order to work on that one, I don't want to affect the color or anything for that layer. That layer is going to be only associated with rough, nothing else. So you see that roughness get connected there. Now we are going to enter into another stage in where we have that layer that can have additional information in it. And just like in Photoshop, you can create masks within the layer. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go and click on this icon. I'm going to say add a black mask. If I add in a black mask, the black mask is just like in Photoshop when you have a mask. Now that it's completely black, it's completely transparent, meaning it's making this object, this roughness that I have, that I'm planning to do, is completely transparent. So nothing's happening right now. But I need to add to that mask another component. I could go and paint directly to see when I'm on the rough mask, the icons change, or the menu, the properties changed for me to be able to paint, and I could go and paint on it if I wanted to paint things there. But that's not the idea. The idea is to add some sort of like a scratches or kind of like a roughness affections. So if I go back to clicking on the layer, you see that the properties of the layer appear, and of course you see we're working on the rough. Let me go back to the rough mask, and in the mask I'm going to, instead of painting on it directly, I'm going to add to it one thing they have there that is called a generator, and that generator generates an extra level there that right now is empty, which means I can apply and connect to it certain information to make that mask a bit more active, and that is almost like taking some templates, some samples, and of course you see that when you select it, there is this generator thing that appears. If I click on it, then you get to see some pre-created things that the substance has in order for you to manipulate the mask. So I have right now, for example, I have dirt or dripping or fiberglass. You have other ones like grayscale or curvature, position, metal edge wear. So you can think of that as an option. I'm going to do one that is a little bit more noticeable, at least in this case. I'm going to use this one is distance. This one is UV random colors, texel. So let me try to go back to something like this dirt, just to make it a bit more old and color used. And so you can start seeing now that my objects start to show this noise. And of course I'm in the dirt right now, so I can manipulate the levels of the dirt. You can make it more noticeable or less noticeable. You can just go increase or decrease. If you look around, you're gonna find that it has different looks on it. This is a procedurally generated, so it means it is not really based on a specific texture. It's using some texture as a reference, but it's affecting and modifying it all the time. So I have the potential for me to fine tune or play with the edges of it and play with different things on this mask. If I go and try to look at my material, let's see if this is making a difference on my material. Right now I see very little of it. I see some of it. You can see some of that noise showing up in certain places, not as strongly. It's more like a way for me. I can see it more on where the images are changing in terms of affecting the light. Let me just try to change the light a little bit. So I'm just gonna go back to here when I have my environment settings, and I'm going just to rotate the light a little bit to try to see. You see how now how the paint shows a little bit of a roughness, how it is affected by that mask that I created. It's very, very subtle, but of course that's the goal. You're gonna try to work on subtleties so that you get to see better texture all around. So I can also expand on this if I want to make it a bit more noticeable. Of course, let's just see if I can just play with my scale better, a bit more, and just or the grouchiness of it less or more, so I can see a bit more of the way it is blending with my environment. Now I can also add on top of it another element if I wanted to add an extra fill within the same roughness, just to enrich my effect. Right now I have just very little bit. Let me just bring it back to the way it was before. I'm covering right now with my fills, because my field, you see my field once I turn it on, the effect is covered because the new fill is blocking it. But now I can add on top of that dirt that I added to it. I can add another fill. You can see here, you can play with that by either just keeping it out. You can paint on it if you want, or if you want, you can assign to it an additional procedural information that you start thinking of, let's say, finding scratches to it. I think there is some different ones down here that you can try to find and look to see if you can get to work. So we have wood there, we have, there's something like metal scratches somewhere, I think. So I'm gonna try now this one of those here. There is a crouch fingerprints dirty. Let's see if I can see it. Not really. I don't think that one is good. So I invite you to go and play and find the one that makes more sense to you. Stains, stone, smudgy. This one has got smudgy, heavy. So I'm gonna add that to it. So of course that now has some information in it, and if I go to my mask, I could look at that only, so that I know what it is doing. I can just play with the contrast of it and how much balance it has. I can just flip it horizontally or vertically. And again, we're just adding extra information to have an additional level of roughness on top of the one dirt that we already created. The more contrast you have, the better you have. So now you have this. What we're looking at is only applying to this component within this layer. So it gets very, very sophisticated. So I'm going to go back to my material, because right now this is just only applying to one part of the roughness. You can see it there, but it's not, we're not seeing the dirt base that we have. Let me go back to my mask for a moment. I want to see it. I'm going to just try to push the contrast of it so that I can get a very dramatic effect, so that it's not just gray, but look, I really see that the paint is kind of starting to kind of fade away. But let me go back to my material. So you sort of see it there, activating the effect. And I'm going to, in order for me to be able to see the previous one on top of it, or added to it, I'm going to make this one either multiplied, or we can just play with the mode, just like in Photoshop, to add on top of the other one. So I'll try to say, if I can say multiply, what happens to it. Let me go back to my mask. I get to see it more in mask. Multiply is not doing it. I'm gonna say lighten. So lighten shows the original one plus the additional scratches added to it. You can see how one of the on top of the other one gives the effect. So if I go back to my material, I can play with or see how my initial color or paint is a little bit faded and old.